Mrs. Alvarez, the classroom teacher, strolled quietly between desks, her shoes barely making a sound. She smiled warmly at her students, offering soft words of encouragement. A kind-hearted woman in her early 40s, Mrs. Alvarez had taught for nearly 2 decades and had a special gift for connecting with children. Her students loved her not just for her patience, but because she listened, really listened. Today, they were taking a simple spelling test. Words like cat, dog, and sun were neatly printed on the board. Most students leaned over their papers, tongues poking out in concentration, pencils scratching rhythmically, all except Lucas. Lucas was a small boy with messy brown hair and big eyes that usually sparkled with curiosity. But today, he was different. He sat hunched at his desk, shoulders tense and eyes downcast. His pencil hovered over the paper but didn't move. His knuckles were white from gripping it too tightly. Mrs. Alvarez's gaze drifted over the room until it landed on him. She made a mental note, deciding to talk to him after the test. When the bell rang for recess, the room erupted into cheerful chaos. Kids leapt from their seats, laughing and chatting as they rushed to the playground. Mrs. Alvarez walked from desk to desk, collecting papers with her usual words of praise or encouragement. When she reached Lucas's desk, she paused. His test was nearly blank, but at the bottom, in shaky, uneven letters, he had written just 2 words, "Help me." Beneath the words was a dark smudge maybe, a tear. Mrs. Alvarez's chest tightened. She knelt beside his desk and whispered, "Lucas, sweetheart, are you okay?" Lucas didn't answer. He just gave a tiny nod, eyes still fixed on the desk. Before she could say anything more, he shoved his chair in and darted out the door. She watched him go, heart pounding. Something was wrong, very wrong. She slipped the paper into her desk drawer and decided not to wait. She headed straight to the teacher's lounge. The lounge was quiet, save for the hum of the coffee machine. She pulled out Lucas's file from the storage cabinet and flipped through the pages. His records were clino-disciplinary issues, good attendance, decent grades. Notes from other teachers painted the picture of a normal, happy child. But things had changed. 2 weeks earlier, Lucas had flinched violently when a janitor dropped a metal bucket. His hands flew up to protect his face. Most kids laughed. Lucas looked terrified. Then, last week, he'd worn a thick hoodie on a warm day. When he reached for a book, the sleeve pulled back just enough for Mrs. Alvarez to see a bruise on his wrist. "Lucas," she had asked gently, "what happened to your arm?" "I fell," he'd whispered, tugging the sleeve down. Kids fall all the time, but something in his voice had made her stomach drop. Now, staring at the words, "Help me," she knew she couldn't ignore this. She called the school counselor. A half-hour later, Lucas sat in the cozy, lavender-scented counselor's office. He clutched a teddy bear in his lap. Ms. Rivera, the school counselor, sat across from him, speaking gently. Mrs. Alvarez sat beside him. "Lucas, remember your test?" she asked softly. "You wrote something on it. Do you want to tell us what it meant?" Lucas said nothing. His hands picked nervously at the bear's fur. Ms. Rivera handed him a coloring book and crayon. "You don't have to talk if you don't want to. We can just sit." Minutes passed. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, Lucas said, "I'm not supposed to talk." "Who told you that, sweetheart?" Ms. Rivera asked. Lucas shook his head. "It's okay," Mrs. Alvarez said. "You're not in trouble." "Jenny yells a lot," he murmured. "Jenny?" "Dad's new wife." Ms. Rivera nodded slowly. "What happens when she yells?" "She puts me in the closet," he said. "It's dark. She locks it, says bad kids go in the dark." Mrs. Alvarez reached for his hand. It was ice cold. "You're safe here," she said. Ms. Rivera stood and signaled for Mrs. Alvarez to follow. In the corner, she whispered, "We need to call Child Protective Services now." They placed the call. The social worker said someone would arrive in about an hour, but Lucas's father was due to pick him up in 30 minutes. "We'll keep him in the nurse's office," Mrs. Alvarez said. 10 minutes later, Lucas sat on the small cot in the nurse's office. Mrs. Alvarez sat with him, holding his hand. Then the walkie-talkie crackled. His dad's truck just pulled in. Mrs. Alvarez's heart leapt. "We need to stall," She instructed Miss Rivera to tell him Lucas needed to be signed out in person and had stayed for extra help. Moments later, the front doors burst open. Lucas's father and Jenny walked in, both impatient and annoyed. "We're here for Lucas," Jenny snapped. "He stayed after for some help," Mrs. Alvarez said smoothly. "I just need you to sign him out," Jenny tried to push past. "He's 5. He doesn't need extra help. We're taking him now." Mrs. Alvarez blocked her path. "It's just school policy." Just then the door opened again. A woman in a blue blazer entered, followed by a police officer. The badge around her neck said Child Protective Services. "I need to speak with you both," the social worker said. Jenny's face turned red. At that moment, Miss Sprague, Rivera appeared holding Lucas's hand. When he saw his father and Jenny, he whimpered and buried his face in Mrs. Alvarez's side. "Lucas, get over here," Jenny barked. The officer stepped in. "Ma'am, I need you to calm down." The next hour passed in a blur. The parents were taken into a private office. The officer stood guard outside. Mrs. Alvarez sat with Lucas in the nurse's office. She read to him, held his hand, and told him again and again that he was safe. Later, the social worker returned. She knelt before Lucas and said gently, "You're going to stay with a nice lady tonight. She has a big fluffy dog named Buddy. He loves kids." Lucas looked up. "A dog?" "A really friendly one, and tomorrow some other kind people will talk to you, but tonight you'll play with Buddy." Lucas nodded. Mrs. Alvarez helped him gather his things. As she knelt to zip his backpack, she whispered, "You are so brave. Remember that." Lucas hugged her tightly. Then he took the social worker's hand. As they walked outside, he turned to wave. Mrs. Alvarez stood in the doorway, waving back until the car disappeared. Behind her, Principal Harris placed a hand on her shoulder. "You did good today." Mrs. Alvarez nodded, eyes still damp. "Today, we did our job." And somewhere that night, a little boy slept safely for the first time in a long while, knowing that someone had finally listened.